I'd like to call the meeting of the Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee to order. This is August 3rd, and it is now 5:30 PM. If you would take the roll call, please.
Chair Hanneman,
Here.
Vice Chair Cardinal, Member Smith,
Here.
Member Barrett,
Here.
Member Bowden, Member Hill. Here. A quorum's present. Oh, no, Member Bolentini, a quorum's present.
Okay. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to call for public comment. The public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Carson City Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee, including any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda as an action item. Do we have any members of the public who would like to weigh in at the moment? Okay, seeing none, we will go on. I would like to, before we go on with the agenda, welcome back Katie Bowden. Thank you for serving again. And also I'd like to introduce a new member of this committee, and that is Gina Hill. So Gina, would you take a moment and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Do I have to press on the microphone? Or just...
Yes.
My name is, thank you. Okay. My name is Gina Lopez Hill. I've been a Carson City resident for the most part since 1977, moved away for college and career, came back about 17 years ago. I am currently the executive director of the Brewery Arts Center, and I also serve on the board of directors for Proscenium Players, and just happy to be a part. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome, Gina. We're glad to have you here. You'll give us another perspective, which is terrific. So on item 3 for possible action, the approval of minutes of June 22nd. Does anyone who was here at that particular time have any corrections or deletions?
Would they be accepted as submitted?
Okay, Mr. Barrett approves that they be accepted as submitted. It's hard to understand you, and I'm now looking for a second. Mumble. Now looking for a second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, so moved. The minutes are accepted. We are now on agenda item 4A.
Madam Chair, for the record,
Yes?
Member Lopez abstains
Is abstained, okay.
because she was not here.
I wasn't
All right.
here.
Sorry, thank you. So, still. On 4A, for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding, excuse me, the expenditure of up to $8,550 from the Facade Improvement Program Fund for facade improvements to the building located at 602 North Curry Street, known, excuse me, as the Chateau Bliss, within the redevelopment area number 1. And Lee Plemel, who is not here tonight, he is on the Zoom screen, will be taking this. Lee, take it away, please.
Okay, thank you. For the record, Lee Plemel, Community Development Department. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen in a little presentation. Thanks for kind of bearing with us tonight. I didn't plan on attending this meeting through this. I don't have all my materials. I'm using everything online as it is, but let me see if I can pull up my presentation here. I'll give a very short presentation, and we also have Terry Preston on the line representing the applicant if you have any questions. And, I know, Desi, could you let me share my screen for presentation? Let me, I got the right one. All right, y'all see that? Okay, so as you mentioned, this is a facade improvement application for the Chateau Bliss at 602 North Carson Street. let me go. This is located on North Curry Street. It's located on the corner of Robinson and North Curry, and the request is for awnings and painting. The request at their cost, it's gonna cost them, they request the $85.50, but I'll talk a little bit about that in the recommendation. This is probably a familiar building to you that sits here on the corner of North Curry and Robinson Street. It's on the corner. All four facades are visible from the right-of-way. This is looking from Robinson Street. So they're going to be replacing the awnings and repainting the building. The applicant's using the vendor that did the awnings originally so that they can reuse the existing frames, and so the awning is just going to be the fabric replacement. And then they have the 3 bids in the packet for the painting. And as I mentioned, the recommendation is going to be for a little bit less than what their request is to pay, because they are not using the lowest bid on one of the painting bids because of timing. So based on the lowest bids, the recommendation is to approve the expenditure of up to $7,730 for the facade improvements. And I'll conclude with that. And again, the applicant is also on our WebEx here if you have any questions. Yeah, I'm going to.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead. All right, thank you. Was Terry on the line?
Yeah, I am.
All right, you want to
Can you
give
hear me right?
Go ahead and give your presentation, Terry.
Okay, actually, I do want to clarify what we're requesting on their leave, because I think that we had presented 4 bids for painting, and we were going to eliminate the least expensive one because they were residential painters primarily and not commercial. So I did want to clarify that. I'm representing the owners, who are actually Mark and Marilyn Chim, and they have done quite a bit of work to the property since they originally took it over. The interior has been completely redone and is now being occupied by the firm Cairo Spa, which is a spa area, spa business that offers massages, facials, Cairo, and saunas. So I think they've been a good addition to the neighborhood. They have also, we've done a lot of landscaping and exterior improvements, and we have been working closely with the owners of the Silver Queen to try to clean up that corner. So, do you have any questions?
So Terry, the lowest bidder would have been Sean Nolan Painting, is that correct?
Okay, there were 3 bids. I think the lowest one was actually Abby.
What we have in our packet is
So I'm going to switch back. In the packet, sorry, I'm switching back and forth on screens here a little bit. I have the same that you have. The Sean Nolan was the lowest bid at $9,860
Okay.
of the 3 that I have remaining. So that's the bid that's used to establish the recommended funding.
Okay, and Terry, you stated that the low bidder, unless this is incorrect here, was a house painter, and Sean Nolan has done commercial painting.
I actually put in. No, actually, it was my error. I had put in 4 bids initially, and the one was a house painter. So we did go ahead and bring it down to the 3 bids that were commercial.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there anything else you'd wish to say, or is any of our committee here would like to ask any questions of this? I think we're all familiar with where this is, and it has been an eyesore for quite a while. So it's sort of exciting that it's going to get a new lease on life. So does anybody have any comments or questions before we call for the vote?
Yeah, I have one. So Lee, maybe it was you. Did you say that we are going to go with a certain bidder because of the timing or the work schedule? Can you explain that a little further, please? What time frame are we looking at?
Maybe Terry can answer that. Per the facade improvement resolution and the guidelines, when you get the three bids, the city reimburses based on the lowest bid, but it specifically said the applicant doesn't have to take the lowest bid for whatever reason it might be. Terry?
Yeah, what we're going to do is whoever we can get to do it as quickly as possible, because the awnings are already, pretty well ready to go, and they can't go on the building until actually it's been painted. So actually with the COVID, what's happened is a lot of painters have been really, really busy. So we're just looking at who we can get in there quickest.
Okay. I guess for me, I was a little confused on the sheet in the packet, and I know that the fourth bid was dropped because, to your earlier remarks, they were not commercial. And then it says that we have chosen Tahoe Blue because they can get us on their schedule. But I was just trying to determine what type of schedule was this, and this is why I was pushing for a response to your question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any further comments or questions for Terry, since she is the one submitting this application? So you are okay with the, how much is it, the 7,000? Yeah, that we are giving you then, should we so vote to do that? I'm not going to push anybody, so. Okay, all right, I will take a nomination or to go ahead and approve this. Is anybody?
Motion?
Or, yeah, a motion to approve? Anybody like to make the motion?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve this with the bidder that was submitted of the, what was the amount again, 7,000 and what?
No, it's,
7730.
yeah,
Was it? I'm trying to find my numbers. I guess they're-
yeah,
I'll second that motion.
7,730.
yeah, 7,730.
So, Member Smith, if I may, I just want to point your direction to the staff report that's included with the agenda. On that first page of the staff report, you have your proposed motion. That specifies the dollar amount for the facade improvement, but then there's also additional language proposed to be part of that motion as well. So it's subject to the conditions of approval in the staff memo, and then also a grant of the waiver policy requiring the three bids for the proposed awning improvements. So unless, that's of course subject to the discretion of this body, but unless there's any concerns or contradictions to that proposed motion, I would suggest and recommend that you read that proposed motion onto the record.
Which is the 8,500.
No, right here.
$7,730.
It's in the front.
So again, if I can start back over my motion, I would like to make a motion that we accept and approve for the amount of $7,730.
Second stands.
Okay, and that is with what you suggested, the proposed motion with the conditions as directed. So would you prefer that we read the whole thing?
I think just for clarity of the record, just to be extra clear,
Okay.
unless there's any opposition to that recommended language, my recommendation would be
So-
to read that entire
So
motion
Member
on the
Smith,
record.
do you have this, that he wants you to
Probably
read this?
do,
Here, take this.
got yours handy.
Yeah, it's right there.
Read it here on the proposed motion.
Yeah,
I move to approve the expenditure of $7,730 for facade improvements to the building located at 602 North Curry Street, subject to the conditions of approval in the staff memo, and to grant a waiver of the policy requiring three bids for the proposed awning improvements. See discussions below regarding recommended funding.
Second and third time.
all right. So we've got a motion and a second, And now I'm calling for the vote. So all in favor?
Aye.
Nays? None? Well, Terry, you've got your money. Go make it look beautiful. Thank you. Okay, on the next item, it's, this will be turned over to Lucia Maloney. Lucia. I always want to call her Lucia. Maloney, who is the Transportation Director or Manager for Carson Public Works, and you will be discussing the Carson City downtown parking analysis.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. Lucia Maloney, Transportation Manager. I'll just kick this off and then Lee will give the meat of the matter. This was a partnership between Public Works and the Community Development Department. It was funded by the Regional Transportation Commission. And really, from time to time, we get questions about the downtown parking strategy. Is there ample parking for both businesses and our visitors and residents to downtown? And so periodically we look at availability of parking and to make sure that we're doing the right thing for our community and providing the services that we need. So we conducted this study in 2019. We did a first round during the legislative session. Then we came back to analyze parking in the fall after the legislative session. And then we went back a third time to look at parking turnover to understand if the 2-hour parking policy downtown was working. And so Lee will give more details about the findings of that study, and we're happy to be here to present them to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lucia. And Desi, can I share my screen again to pull up this presentation? Okay. Yeah, thanks, Lucia. And so parking enforcement is under community development. So we have somebody going around enforcing the 2-hour parking and other parking provisions downtown. And Lucia serves as the administrative hearings officer. So if somebody hasn't complained about their ticket, they have to go see Lucia. And also Public Works is in charge of the parking limit, the time limits, and other conditions of parking and loading zones in the downtown, and they get requests for specific types of parking things. So we do work closely, and obviously Public Works is very involved in the parking situation in the downtown. But I'm just going to kind of go over fairly briefly a few slides just to summarize the findings of the parking study. The study was done in the area that's represented on the map here, which at the top, it goes from William Street. At the south boundary, it goes down to 5th Street. This is the kind of, and it goes from Nevada Street over to Stewart Street in the core area here. And this is kind of the core downtown business district that can be, and in particular, kind of the area that can be impacted by the legislature at certain times of year. The parking count included all on-street parking spaces within this area and all public parking lots, which are labeled here. And it also included some private parking lots, and we distinguished them in some of the numbers, but there are some, it's not all the private parking lots. It's only a few private parking lots that are specifically open to public parking. And as Lucia said earlier, we wanted to definitely do counts while the legislature is in session, which was done in May 2019, and then we did it when they were not in session as well, just for comparison. There's about 1,400 total public spaces amongst all of that category that I mentioned earlier. And again, there's kind of the breakdown, how many are on street and public lots and in private lots. And 71% of all the parking has no restrictions on it, with about 22% having the 2-hour limit. So the intent of where the 2-hour parking is generally in the core near shopping, where you want to have some turnover. You want to make parking available for customers. So there's actually still quite a bit of parking with no restrictions within the area. When I give this presentation, and I found this slide from back in, I think it was 2007, when we did an initial parking analysis with the downtown mixed use zoning code, just to kind of give some context of how big we're talking about when we look at these areas. In the red here was that central area of the total area, which goes from Robinson Street to Musser Street. And kind of the shaded area imposed here is the Walmart property, with the total shading being the total Walmart property, and imposed in there you can see the building and the parking lot. So you can see when somebody parks in the Walmart parking lot, unless they get the parking space right in front, you're walking a block just to get to the front door. You're walking another block in the store to get to things. So I think this just gives some context when we talk about the ability of somebody to park right on the street, right in front of a business. When you have a good active downtown, sometimes parking becomes a problem, but you do want to have parking in the vicinity within a reasonable distance. So I like to show that graphic. So kind of to get to the meat of it, here's the summary findings, if you want to call them that. These are graphs with, on the left there is the counts during the legislature, average counts during the legislature. On the right is in September when they're not in session. These are based on time of day. So from the far left here, starting at 8 a.m. to 5 a.m., see it kind of ramps up as we would kind of anecdotally see downtown. It kind of ramps up towards noontime and then back down again in the afternoon and evening. The first blue line here is the total number of lots on public property. So as I mentioned, we counted parking also in these private parking lots that allow public parking. And that's this 1,400 number up here. But the blue line is just strictly the public parking spaces. So you can see even during the legislature overall, and again, this is overall, and I'll get into the breakdown by area a little bit on the next slide, but overall the capacity remains with some parking spaces available downtown. The analysis also shows the capacity based on individual street sections. So this is block by block on average, whether the parking was full in that segment or 90%, 80%, et cetera. Full. So as expected, you have, and as we kind of know from just being down here, we have the spots where there's, the hot spots where parking tends to get full during the peak times. But this is also an interesting map to look at because you can always see there's always within a block or two parking available, which is a good thing. We can also look at this and use it to evaluate where we might add or take away 2-hour parking, for example. And I believe this is my final slide just to kind of wrap up. So, as I think the graph showed, there's an overall availability of parking with the maximum utilization overall at 57% during the legislature. But I think more importantly and realistically, you look at this peak utilization by the different area because people aren't going to walk from the far north to the southern part. So, and as expected, during the legislature, you have the peak utilizations in that southern area where it's the maximum occupancy is 76% versus 45% in the non-legislative time. And I think as expected, you have a little bit lower percentage overall right now on the on-street and public parking in that northern portion north of Robinson Street. And then you have the central core that seemed to be pretty steady during both times at around 60% occupancy. There's been an effort over the last year with the parking lots and availability to kind of direct some of the employees in the core business district over to parking lots that are a couple blocks away to leave some of the on-street parking spaces free in front of the businesses. Lucia, that's kind of, that concludes really this presentation. Lucia, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think you covered it. As we move forward, we'll continue to try to be responsive and dynamic to make sure that we're offering as much as we can and meeting the different needs as they evolve. So appreciate any questions or comments on this.
Does anybody have any comments or questions? Okay, I have a couple. Oh, do you? Go ahead.
I had a question. I saw the ADA percentage. Is that good, bad, or indifferent on the ADA parking space? I thought it was like 2.5% or something like that.
I think we meet, in general, we meet the requirements for ADA parking spaces and the right-of-way downtown. As circumstances evolve, we continue to assess that. When we went through and did the Curry Street project, for example, we double-checked and made sure we had adequate ADA parking spaces. So I don't know necessarily that there's a percentage we're trying to reach, so much as just making sure that they're spaced out and adequate to meet both requirements as well as demand for those spaces.
Sorry, I was looking for the number as right after you asked the question, and I just found it. It's 2.5% of the total number of spaces, which for that many spaces is actually probably more than would be required if we had a parking lot of a 1,400 space parking lot.
Okay, I have a question too. In your conclusions and recommendations, you talk about the Nugget Lot. Now, that would be considered private, would it not? So, and you were saying there's always room in that particular lot. So I'm thinking that people don't know that they can park there unless you are a patron of the Nugget. How'd you come to that conclusion?
Sorry, yeah, what was the
question?
let me try to answer it if
Yeah.
I don't quite answer it.
Yeah,
Right.
basically
But-
is, yeah, go ahead.
The Nugget lot, well, that's come up, and I think there's some signage issues that we need to work with them on, because there's a really good sign that says public parking there, and there's also no trespassing signs there, so I think we can help get rid of some of that conflicting signage, but they've definitely reached out and said that the public can and the businesses can use those parking lots.
Okay, I think I never park there because of the fact that I think it's for patrons only, so that answers that. So that would probably.
Yeah, and it's not all of the Nugget parking lots. There's the ones specifically that are south of Telegraph Street.
Okay, and the other question too, in the analysis, and I wasn't really sure what I was looking at there, the legislative building, is that considered also public? So that is open if you do the map that you were talking about in here?
The legislative parking lot on the state property, well, which one are you talking about?
That's behind the legislature, because that I
Yeah,
thought
that
was a
wasn't
public parking lot.
Yeah, I could go back to the map if you need to, but the state parking lot to the north of the Capitol building was counted, and that's one that's specifically labeled as public parking outside of business hours. But the legislative parking lot behind the legislative building was not part of the study. Those spaces weren't counted. I should note too that this wasn't a study to see if there's enough parking for the legislature. It was kind of what the impacts are on the city side and on the business side.
Right, I understand that, but when they're not in session, there's always parking there, and it's nice covered parking. So that's the only reason I point that one out, so. And then you put in, and you've referenced a couple of times in here about the fact that you want to do a brochure or something to allow people to know that there is truly a lot of parking downtown. How are you going to distribute that?
Yeah, I'll start, and maybe Lucia can help out, because it's come up about, I don't know if it was brochure or working with, getting the information out to the businesses. But the key is also signage for visitors and just making sure the signage directs people on the street to where the parking is available. Lucia, can you help with that at all?
Which, by the way, Lee, is something we don't have right now, and many other cities have public signage where it says to the right parking, public parking or whatever, and we should do that. Go ahead, Lucia.
No, I think that's a great comment, and that was a comment that we heard when we presented this to the Regional Transportation Commission at their July meeting as well, was the need for wayfinding signage and helping people, really quickly get to an open parking space so they can get downtown and enjoy all the great amenities that we have. With regard to a brochure, that's not something that we've discussed really in depth, but we have talked about, educating and getting the word out. And so if there's opportunities or partnerships, perhaps with the chamber or others, that's something that we could discuss.
Okay, because I'm reading here in the documents that were presented, which was number 3, is that that educational efforts such as a parking map could be beneficial in directing more motorists towards lots 3 and 4. So that's why I bring that up. So I'm sure you have got that covered, so. All right, are there any other questions or comments on this? Because there's no action required other than informational. Yes?
This is Gina Lopez. I just have a quick question. What was the reason for the analysis in the first place? Were you getting a lot of complaints that wasn't a lot of parking downtown? Aside from obvious days of the year like Nevada Day and Christmas tree lighting and that, were there a lot of complaints?
I'll start and Lee can fill in if I butcher this, but I hear it on the parking hearing side where periodically we get business either owners or employees that say I have to walk to get to wherever I work downtown, and it gets dark early on and it's kind of far to walk, and let's look at the 2-hour parking. Is that making sense? Or we'll hear at a hearing from a worker at the state that says we don't have any parking. I have to walk so far, and we want to make sure that works. And so just periodically we'll get it, and we hadn't looked at it in a few years, and so we talked with Lee and he agreed that we should take another look and revisit and make sure we're on the right track.
Yeah, and I'll add, obviously, the Board of Supervisors obviously got enough complaints that they put it in the capital improvements funding for last year to fund it. So that's why it was done.
Thank you.
Well, this has been going on as long as I've been a resident of Carson City, so it always comes out basically the same. And you were referencing some of the major events. I mean, any city you go into in the United States, if there's a major event, you're not going to get close in parking. And then on Saturday mornings, when you are at the farmer's market, somehow or other people always find parking. So I think where there is a will, there is a way. So it's good to have the study to say that, hey, we've got plenty of parking. One question, maybe I'm opening a Pandora's box here, is there any way that you can do something with the wonderful parking garage that is part of, I hate to even say the name, the Ormsby House? I mean, is there any way that can be purchased? That's an amazing parking lot that is not used at all. Or am I putting you on the spot?
Yeah, that's putting us on the spot for sure to to buy a private parking garage. But that is in an area. It's at the south end. It's right cat a corner from an area that has some of the highest demand. So, certainly having that open and available to the public would be of benefit. So, we'll keep that in mind as projects come forward for that building.
I do recall at one time, and it never came to pass, that over at Telegraph Street, and what's the one south of that, where the Union is?
Proctor.
Proctor, behind there, the city was going to going to do a partnership with the state that never came to pass. So perhaps, talking to the state again as it related to maybe co-funding, I mean, this is a bad time to talk about something like this, but co-funding the parking garage, because that's where a lot of the state employees work. So it's worth looking at. So, any other comments at all? All right, so then we will, yes.
I just have to comment that I think you'd have to offer a lot of money to pry the parking lot at the Ormsby House away from the people who are trying to sell it, because that would then diminish the value of the thing if they didn't have a parking garage there. I don't know. I don't know whether I'm right about that or not, but we'll see.
I don't
perhaps
either.
a
I know
lease.
that there are a lot of their parking area that is surface parking is being sold, so who knows? Okay, so this next one is, we are on right now the presentation and discussion regarding Southwest Carson Circulation Study. And this one should be very interesting. And Lucia, are you doing this, or Lee, are you weighing in?
I'll kick off. Thank you, Madam Chair. Izzy, if you don't mind sharing my screen, that would be fantastic. Excellent. So thank you for having me this evening. A little over a year ago, we presented to the RAC the need for looking at really the after South Carson scenario. So Carson City has invested heavily in the South Carson Street project. There's lane narrowing. There's a number of improvements that are going in that affect the capacity and how South Carson Street operates. And we as staff and the RAC at that time agreed that it was really important, particularly for the purpose of RAC, to look at those parallel roadways down in the South Carson area, look at Silver Sage, look at Curry Street, and say, after this South Carson project is complete, how are those streets going to function? And are there any operational improvements that we can make to continue to ensure ample business access and circulation for those South Carson businesses? So that was one component of this study. The second component of the study was looking down south at South Carson and in the Appian Snyder area. As you know and are well aware, there's a lot of development happening right now in South Carson, and what that's doing to that intersection there at Snyder and Appian, and whether it makes sense to put in a signal or some sort of traffic control device, and how that might impact circulation in the area. So that was kind of the second piece of this study. We're really grateful that RAC funded this study, and it was, in my mind, really successful and gave us a lot of ideas and things that the city can work on and prioritize moving forward. So that said, Lauren Chilson from Headway Transportation is here, and he's going to present to you the findings from the study that were also presented to the Regional Transportation Commission at their July meeting. So Lauren, take it away and let me know when I can move forward the slides.
Sounds good. First, I trust you're able to hear me, and nod would be good. Excellent. All right, and I'll let you click through the slides, and just as a forewarning, there are in the first few slides a couple extra clicks. And I'm not sure that you're actually presenting your screen because I don't see it.
No? Do you see it over there?
No.
We just see you.
How do I share my screen, Desi?
If you go to the top of the window, yes.
Share content.
There you go.
There we go. Thank you for your patience.
Very good. Okay, thanks. Good evening. As Lucia mentioned, there are really two primary study purposes this work. And the first is to really look at long-term circulation on routes that are parallel to South Carson Street. I'm sure you're well aware the project under construction and the changes that will be happening on South Carson. And so this study builds upon that one and says, well, with changes on Carson, would anyone driving actually move to a parallel route, and should we plan ahead for that eventuality if that were to occur? So we'll address that. And then the other thing, as Lucia mentioned, is the key to this study is how Snyder Avenue and developments on Appian Way should ultimately connect to South Carson Street. The Snyder Avenue realignment project has been contemplated for a long time, and we want to provide some additional detail and recommendations on how we think that should actually happen. And of course, being a RAC-funded project, we want to do what we can to emphasize redevelopment opportunities and business vitality through our transportation planning. So that's touched upon as well. And I think I might have go a couple clicks there, Lucia. I probably jumped ahead. So again, the Appian area and then the parallel corridors. Next slide, please. So this study does build on prior work. Of course, the plans that were presented were created for South Carson Street, which is under construction. And you can click forward. Back in 2019, we prepared a very detailed study for the South Carson Street corridor, which looked at a number of intersections and made recommendations, which were then implemented in the final plans. Next slide. And of key importance to this study are the 6 projects that are all planned and approved for the most part along Appian Way and in the Cochise area north up to Clearview. And the large pinkish purple is, of course, the Carson Hills Apartments. And there's a number of other retail projects right in that area. So Appian Way is really a hub of recent development activity. We recognize that and want to incorporate that in our recommendations. Next slide, please. So let's dive right in first to the Snyder Avenue and West Appian Way area, given those recent developments and again the long-term planning of the Snyder realignment. So there are a number of goals for this particular area, and we've created those goals and used them as a screening criteria for an alternatives analysis to help define the best overall solution for this area. And those goals are improving emergency access from Fire Station 53, which is over on Snyder, on the east side of Carson, South Carson Street. Given the amount of development, we would like to improve access to Appian. We think that a good way to do that would be through a new signalized crossing of South Carson Street in that Appian Overland area. And of course, we want to improve access to the Snyder Avenue, the east side, as well in the process. Next slide. So we went through a methodical, tiered approach to a screening and alternatives analysis, where we first opened up the box and said, what are all the things that we could possibly do down here? We came up with 11 different alternatives. We screened those against the project goals, identified any fatal flaws, and reduced the number down to 5 options, where we provided geometric layouts, that's a preliminary engineering drawing, looked at right-of-way, looked at who and how many properties would benefit from access, trying to get as many as possible and assessing that, identifying construction costs and any other criteria, pointing out criteria or issues that we thought could arise with different scenarios. And those 5 were narrowed down to a preferred alternative. Next slide. So again, on the left, here's the 11 initial concepts, and we move those forward to the 5 in the colored table. Green is best, yellow is okay, and red is not quite as good. But those things are all relative to each other. And after screening in great detail through 5 different scenarios or alternatives, we arrived at a preferred alternative, which I will show you on the next slide. So here it is. The grand conclusion of that analysis is that Appian Way is the best location for a new traffic signal, and that Snyder Avenue should be aligned around the north side of Carson Lanes and Aloha Liquor building there. Use the frontage road as it exists today and tie back in at West Appian, or opposite West Appian. This serves as all of the project goals, the primary goals, and best serves properties on both sides of South Carson Street, accomplishing really what we think is the best overall solution. I will point out, though, that on the east side of the intersection where the sharp curvature is, there's a number of driveways. The frontage road ties in there, the apartment complex ties in, and there's a lot going on in a fairly small space, which is okay, but not ideal. And so there's really a subset of this preferred alternative, which is the next slide. And that is the contemplation of a mini roundabout located a little bit further east from South Carson Street, but in a configuration that better ties together the frontage road, the apartments, and the frontage road to the north with Snyder Avenue in realigned. I will point out, however, that southbound through movements cannot occur through this, effectively what's a 3/4 roundabout. So we did that to reduce traffic conflicts and optimize safety, but that does affect circulation from north to the south. And so that's a disbenefit, if you will. But this may be better in the long term, all things considered. Either scenario could work, and there's a lot of details to be worked out during final design. But that's the grand conclusion for this, the Appian and Snyder line. Next slide, please.
Before you
Let's
go,
move on to the parallel analysis part, or parallel routes analysis part of this study. Again, we're looking at Cochise and Curry as one corridor, and Roop and Silver Sage as the corridor on the east side of South Carson. We've studied 10 intersections, looking at traffic flows, remaining capacity, and identifying how or if these routes should really be used as quote-unquote parallel routes to South Carson Street. Next slide. First, I want to be crystal clear. We do not expect that there would be any significant diversion of traffic from South Carson Street to either the Curry or Silver Sage parallel routes. There is more than adequate capacity following the Complete Streets project, which is under construction right now. There's more than adequate capacity on that roadway to accommodate traffic through at least 2040. However, there may be some opportunity to improve circulation as a whole on those corridors, and so that's what we're looking at. I will give the one caveat that there is some potential that traffic in the very north end of the Carson Street corridor might shift to South Stewart Street, but that's okay because it's a 4-lane roadway and it also has more than adequate capacity. So again, both roadways function fine. South Carson functions fine through 2040. But what can we do to make things a little bit better for business access? As we look at both of these corridors, we find that South Curry Street and Cochise are generally more commercial in nature and will be in the future given the amount of redevelopment, particularly in that Appian, Cochise, Overland area. Silver Sage is really more residential in nature for the most part, and we believe it should really stay that way. So the opportunity here is really to make some improvements on Curry Street and better connect Curry to South Carson to really tie everything together in that redeveloping area. And so the recommendation is that we should build positive linkages between those two roadways and make improvements on Curry Street. So the next slide shows the crux of the recommendations, and I'll just walk through each of them. There's not too many, so this is my last slide, so we'll just bounce through them. First, we suggest that South Stewart Street be connected west over to Curry to make a linkage at the very north end of the corridor. There are still some details to work out there, of course, but that connection would be beneficial for overall circulation. Bicycle lanes are planned throughout South Curry and the Cochise corridor, and we're suggesting that they would be an appropriate improvement between really Lake Glen Drive or the Stewart connection down to roads and beyond, as is planned in some other master plan documents. Some striping and pavement maintenance would go a long ways to encourage use of that route, or at least support it as it redevelops. There are some differential speed limits in the corridor, and we think converting to a consistent 30 miles per hour would be appropriate and clear to drivers, and again, to support future development. The South Curry and Kuntz intersection could be reviewed to simplify the intersection controls and make that intersection a little bit more efficient. And so that's a recommendation. And of course, the big one is the traffic signal at Appian Way and the realignment of Snyder Avenue. That's really the biggest recommendation here. But there is another traffic signal proposed, or suggested rather, at Rhodes and South Carson that would likely happen with redevelopment of the Armory site in the future. But again, that would create a better connection between Curry and South Carson. We think that Oak Street could potentially be improved to support redevelopment and just general circulation in the area east of Snyder and South Carson Street, between Snyder and Clearview. Currently, that street's a little bit dysfunctional in that it varies in width. People back in and out of it. There's some valley gutters that make it a little bit hard to travel on. And so improving that to full city standards could be beneficial. And then finally, there's two parcels at the very south end of the frontage road on the east side of Carson Street, down by NDOT's detention basin, down by the interchange effectively. Those properties are a little bit hard to access, and it may be beneficial for the city to cooperate with those owners over time to try and gain access at Oak Street and just give them better access in general, make them a little bit more developable, perhaps a little bit more valuable, and just generally more ripe for redevelopment. So those are the recommendations. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? I do. Okay, if you could go back and show me one of the big attractions right now that just reopened is the Stewart Indian School. So can you show me on your proposed roundabout or mini roundabout or whatever, how I would tell a visitor to get there? Because right now, excuse me, it's very difficult. The signage is bad, that, it's on the right-hand side. You got to be on the far left-hand side to turn left to get to Snyder. So direct me how I would go to the Stewart Indian School from that.
Sure. So you would need to make a southbound left turn at the Appian Way in a new signalized intersection. Make a left at the roundabout. Follow the curved Snyder roadway up and around Aloha Liquor and then out Snyder Avenue. And the signage would need to occur, somewhere up near Overland in order to give drivers adequate information and time to make the turn at the new Appian intersection. Or alternatively, use Clearview and perhaps improved Oak Street or a Silver Sage down to Snyder. So there could be two different routes.
And could you tell me what that shaded area is, just at the bend?
Oh, yes, so that would be that's the existing roadway that would be removed. Those are basically all pavement areas that would be removed and returned to, landscaping or something like that.
Okay. Right now, just to make it easy, we're telling people to go to Stewart on Clearview, or Clear Creek rather, and take a left there, and then that seems to be the easiest way right now because it's so difficult to get to there. The other thing, too, that I have a question on is you're talking about Curry Street. So in the northern area, there's a very narrow road that's behind the railroad station, or not the station, but the railroad museum. that gets really rather hairy, especially in the winter. Are you going to be doing something with that portion of it to make it safer? I mean, right now, if you slide off the street, you slide down into the chamber or into the Railroad Museum. Do you know which area I'm talking about?
I do. The 2040 Regional Transportation Plan is currently under an update, but that current document does include enhancements to that segment of roadway. And that is still proposed through or suggested through this study. And perhaps Lucia wants to speak a little bit more to that, but it is in the long range plan.
Okay, that's good.
That's correct, Lauren. It continues to be in the long-range plan. One of the challenges to that section is that there's a portion of Curry that's not owned by Carson City. We have a lease with state lands for that portion behind the Railroad Museum. And there are, as you know, Madam Chair, a substantial amount of stormwater flow issues off that hill. So widening that roadway is no low-cost feat. But it is something that we continue to look at and we're aware of, and hopefully we can find funding for it in the future.
Well, I was just curious because that is a well-used road up in that area, especially now to try to avoid Carson Street and the construction. So I watch it always outside of my window there. So does anybody else have any comments or suggestions, or if not, I thank you both for your input. Interesting. And what is the timeline now on this? I'm sure you said it to begin with, but there's so much there I forgot to finish that section there. Either the light.
Timing-wise,
Yes.
that's a great question. So the Regional Transportation Commission, they took action to approve a pro rata development agreement template that staff could use to seek developer contributions for their impacts to that intersection down at Appian. So we have started collecting those pro rata contributions from those developments to support a portion of that signal. Funding the rest of the signal is something that the city, we have to find funds for. So whether that comes from the Regional Transportation Commission Fund or some sort of federal grant, or potentially, staff are in discussions with one of the property owners down there who may have a project coming up, and it may be cost effective for him to do the signal in partnership with the city. So we're looking at all options to get it constructed in the next couple of years.
Okay, one more question, or you can comment, or one more comment, is with the roundabout, which, by the way, is coming across very well at the end of Stewart there, and it looks great. How are you getting, how do people feel about having, even though it's called a mini roundabout in the south end? I mean, there's so much controversy over that.
That's a great question again, and it's right at the heart of some of the outreach that we're doing. So we've engaged in discussions with those property owners, and ultimately we're going to get to a project that meets both their access needs as well as the bigger circulation needs. I think Lauren kind of mentioned it. I think this is going to operate a little bit different than your typical roundabout, and more to facilitate, access to that signal and make sure there's no backing up or queuing at that intersection. And I think ultimately it's going to look and feel pretty similar to the old Clear Creek intersection down sort of by the Costco. So we think it'll be operational. It'll be a little bit unique, but like I said, we're working with those property owners to make sure they're supportive and that their access needs are met.
Well, all I can say is good luck. So anyway, thank you both so much for your input. Very interesting on all levels. So thank you both. And now we'll go on to our next agenda item, which is for possible action, discussion, and possible action regarding funding priorities for redevelopment expenditures over the next 5 years. Lee, you want to take this one away, please?
Okay, thank you. And Desi, I have a presentation for this final item. If you could allow me to share that, I'll start. Thank you. So this, before I put the presentation up, I'll just say this item is really the start of the discussion regarding funding priorities. I think as the Board of Supervisors, one of their objectives over the last year has been to develop a plan for how going into the future we want to prioritize redevelopment spending. And I think just at the level of this discussion, it's not intended to pick projects and things, but to start the discussion of, what types of projects that might be priorities for redevelopment. So let me switch over to my presentation now. Let me see, where is it? This is the one. And I wanted to start with this slide. This is something you've seen before. This is the discretionary funding slide. It's just a portion of the overall budget. In the packet, you also have the full budget with the 5-year projections, but this is readable, and kind of the point I wanted to show with this is the amount of undesignated that's going to be available. I think once we had some pool savings, we've left some undesignated this year, plus some pool savings. So there are funds available even in this current fiscal year that are anticipated to be available here. But as prior obligations are dropping off in future years, you can see that it really starts to go up into some significant funding in the amount of funds that are available now. I mean, this is significant relative to how much we've had available in redevelopment funding over the past couple of decades. But in terms of capital improvement projects, when you look at the cost of, projects like South Carson Street and things, it's really not that much. So we're going to need to prioritize where funds go over the next few years. Oops, what did I do? Okay, we got that. So this is from the staff report, and just to kind of start the discussion, I think this isn't a formal, in terms of our current priorities, there's actually not a formal document written that has these priorities in it, but I think any of you that have been with redevelopment for the past few years would probably agree that kind of things that are capital improvements with the general public benefit have been the top priority for using redevelopment funding, and that's fixing the sidewalks, the plazas, landscaping, the things above ground, projects that people can see, but also that have a general public benefit rather than giving money to specific businesses and events for that matter. Also, obviously, we have the individual incentive program for exterior facade improvements. I think that was put in there along a similar vein, that even though it benefits individual property owners and individual buildings, it's a look to the whole district, and it benefits surrounding properties as well, that to have the buildings maintained. And then we recently added the incentives for sidewalks, which is again really sort of falls into that first one. We're helping them offset the cost, but it's those are for things on public property, like sidewalks and sewer utility extension and things like that. So I just tried to start the list of other things that have come up over recent months or years as to how priorities might change, for example. And I know one of our members on the committee, perhaps from the Board of Supervisors, has brought up maintenance quite a bit. We continue to fund a lot of projects that are capital improvements, sidewalks, landscaping. We're making things look better, but so far, not necessarily adding additional money to maintain it. So I think that's something like with other city assets, this discussion's going on, and with open space properties, perhaps this is a little bit of a shift that would be considered. or individual property owner incentives. I think as I mentioned in the staff report, there was a property owner incentive program for improving buildings for new businesses. That was canceled in 2010. So it's been 10 years since we had that. But again, now that funds are becoming available again, perhaps some individual property owner incentive might be added. And if there's others you might want to add to that list for discussion, I think this is the time to start the discussion. This is on the agenda for action. You may come up with some priorities that we can forward to the Board of Supervisors. I'm honestly not sure of the timing of when the Board of Supervisors are going to get around to discussing it. This is probably something that they'll take up at their strategic planning retreat at the beginning of next year. So there's not necessarily a rush to get this done, but I think it's good to start the discussion. And if there's any additional information I need to get to come back to RAC, we can start looking into that. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the chair for the discussion. Again, sorry I'm not there and able to run this and a little bit more smoothly.
It's working out fine. It's working out fine. So I do have a couple of questions, but I would like to turn it over to the committee first to ask if they have any questions on what you have proposed or if they have any additions that they would like to see in the future. So you have something?
No question, but thank you, Lee, for including the part about maintenance as an opportunity to discuss. Now that I'm the lamest of lame ducks, I'll just keep my mouth shut.
Oh my, that's no fun. Okay, does anybody else have any comments or whatever before I get into some of the things that I have seen? Yes, Gina?
I have a question. As far as this recommendation for possible improvements and to prioritize, has there been any outreach done to the community as to what they would like to see done?
I don't think it's community at large, Gina. We are stuck within a certain, Area 1 and Area 2, so.
Okay, so to
Yeah.
those property owners then?
Lee, you want to answer that?
Oh, yeah, I'm not on mute. No, and it's hard at this time. I mean, these are the types of opportunities where we would usually get the word out for the public to come out to the meetings, and it's a little difficult situation that we're in right now. And it's the same thing. We're doing Title 18 workshops with the Planning Commission, and without the public being able to come to them. So we're going to try to reach out more and advertise it through media and other ways to get comments on it. So no, at this time we haven't reached out to all the businesses, but as I said, this is really this is a kickoff of the conversation. You can see how high level it is that we're at right now. I'm not talking about specific projects. And as the chair said, it's the Citizens Committee to make recommendations to the Redevelopment Authority on this. So I think this is the place to start the discussion and take public comment.
Gina, there is one thing that keeps coming up all the time from the businesses within the area, not so much the south because there's so much going on there right now, but within our sort of downtown core, and that is the sidewalks. All the sidewalks on Carson Street have pretty well been done, and you now are going on some of the side streets between Curry and Stewart. And actually, the east side of Carson Street has sort of been neglected. And there's quite a few property owners who would like to see that sidewalk extended, and we do have monies in there. And that was one of the things. Do we have a list of where the sidewalks are going to be improved?
So going back to that funding, what we have in the budget now is sidewalks being approved on East Telegraph between Carson and Plaza Street this year. So that Public Works, that's their project this year that they're doing. And then next year, and combining this year's funds and next year's funds, they're doing Curry Street from Musser to Second. I believe it's to Second, but it's in that vicinity. It's that stretch where they're going to be replacing sidewalk, undergrounding power, and replacing the gas lamps.
Well, Stewart really needs to have, to be looked at, especially across or in the area where the Wells Fargo was and Mangiatutu right now. I mean, it's pretty scary to try to walk into the restaurant because I don't know what has been done there. I guess a lot of patching, but that definitely is within the zone area that should be looked at and should be approved.
And I think that makes this discussion timely because we're in August now. We have your regular meetings in November, and then you make in February you're making recommendations for the budget for the following year, and we're going to want to bring want to bring Public Works in with proposed projects that meet the kind of the priorities of what you might be looking at, so that you can then start to choose from which projects and where the need's going to be.
Okay, the other question I have is the Kit Carson Trail historical, it says trial here, but we know it's trail, historic markers. If they do not do that for this fiscal year, they lose their funds, is that correct? Because we were talking in the last couple of
Yes.
meetings about not carrying this over again, like we did for 5 years for the last one.
Right, the $20,000 was put into this current fiscal year budget that just started, but they're moving forward with it, and they definitely plan on getting it done, even by the end of this year, calendar year.
Okay, don't want to dominate, but I have something else, and you were sort of in on the discussion today, is we've spent a lot of money on the downtown, and this goes to your maintenance, okay? And I know that there is a NID, Neighborhood Improvement District, but what I have noticed, because I'm forced to travel downtown on Carson Street right now, because that's the only way to get to work, is that a number of the trees downtown are looking pretty shabby, and some of them are dead, and others really need to be pruned or topped or whatever you call it. And I was wondering whether or not we could put in a line item for maybe tree replacement, because it's pretty sad looking at dead trees when you're in the downtown core.
We're looking into that, actually. Thanks for bringing that up. I don't know that we'll need any additional funding for it but we're looking into whether or not the funding that's already there pays for replacement or not. So we'll figure that out, but certainly make sure that the dead trees get replaced.
All right, so anybody else have any other suggestions of what may be needed? You are going to reach out to the community. Gina, do you have anything within the scope that you would be considering?
No, I don't. I just think it's important to get not only informal input from the property owners, but more of a formal input, and have ways for them to give that.
Okay, Katie, anything that you see that in your daily life that could be better, to make this city even better than it is? So there's always something, I'm sure. I do have a question. Is where Common Coffee is located? Just south of that is a vacant property, which I know is owned privately. Is there a way we could work with the property owner to take out that, macadam or whatever you call it, and put in a park at the expense of redevelopment until such time as they build something that wouldn't be overly pricey, although I know with government everything is pricey, but that would make it like a little pocket park right there that, that's just south of McFadden Plaza, and that would look so much better than what we have now. So is there a possibility of considering that?
Yeah, in fact, I think before, a long time ago, there's actually redevelopment that put some of the planters in that are there, or that were there up until recently. I forget exactly what it looks like now, but I know the property owner worked with the city in the past to let us put some things to make it look better. So yeah, that's certainly, I'll put that on my list to explore and look at.
Yeah, I think that would be a simple fix until such time as, and a place also, I know that we have 50 million benches downtown right now, but I think it would be a great green space that would enhance that portion, because with the Bank Saloon coming in, that just seems like the little blighted area right there. So, thank you. I guess I get it.
Well, kind of after, this is Lee Plemmel, Community Development. After, I don't mean to cut off the discussion, but I think kind of unexpectedly not being there, which might limit the discussion a little bit, and after hearing this, I mean, I don't think you need to take any action tonight. What I want to do then before the next meeting in November is get the word out a little bit more about what you're going to be considering in November. We'll think about it in more detail and hopefully be able to have some more public participation in November, or at least get more feedback by then.
All right. Oops, sorry. In looking at the budget, your projection, I have a couple of questions. Epic Rides is no more. They're not going to be funded any further?
Well, it was funded in the fiscal year 20 was the last year of the agreement. Didn't have it. I don't know the status. They had until there's something that comes back to the Board of Supervisors. I don't know the status of it.
Okay,
But the 30,000 from last year was not expended because they didn't do it.
I understand they got their money anyway, so whether they come back or not. So, and the other, yeah, and the other question I have is the campaigning incentive continues to go up. When does this ever end? Does this end at all, or this goes through 2025 and increases every year? How is that? What is the story behind that?
If I remember, so the campaign incentive is the new one that was entered into within the last couple of years. And it does go through the end of the redevelopment district term. And so it goes up, the slight increase is just an estimate on the increase in car sales over that time.
All right, so when is the end of the redevelopment time? 2030, did you say?
My memory is it goes to 30, but I could be wrong.
I think one of them is 31 and one of them is 34, if I remember correctly. But yeah, they're both in that same vicinity.
Okay, and the Michael Hole incentive has completely washed away, right?
That's my understanding.
All right. All right then. Does anybody else have any questions looking at this budget? So, of course, budgets are, flowing. They can change and whatever. So, okay, I guess, Lee, do you have anything else to say on this item at all?
No, thank you.
Okay, all right. Then without further ado, if there are no other questions or comments, we will get on to discussion only staff report. Do you have anything else to?
I didn't, not prepared to make other reports tonight. So like I said, we had a facade improvement app, unless we get any more facade improvement applications in or something like that, that requires RAC review. I would anticipate our next meeting being at the regular date, first Monday in November.
Right, it's pretty exciting that we've had 2 meetings in a row with BRAC improvement, so that is really a good thing. Okay, does anybody have any future agenda items for the next RAC meeting in November? Anything that you want brought
Madam
forth?
Chair, I
Yes.
have one. Of course,
Okay.
this is in the packet, Lee, but we did not discuss this. But, I'm looking at the redevelopment project proposed, the second plan in project area number 2. We talked about this in the previous meetings, about looking at the northern part of the city with the vacant retail buildings. Can you tell us the timetable that we're looking at as to when the strategies or plans will be carried out, particularly in those reuse of the vacant retail buildings, et cetera? I'm just concerned about, we are paying a lot of attention to the downtown area and the southern part of Carson, but we're sort of neglecting what's on the northern part. Can you share with us as a timetable, and when we're going to have some discussions around that?
I'm not sure where that discussion belongs to add, because what you're talking about is adding a redevelopment district.
Well, not really added. I mean, it's part of the packet, it talks about the project area 2. Is this just for information purposes only for us?
So no, redevelopment area number 2 is the South Carson Street redevelopment district. So
Well,
those are the strategies for the South Carson redevelopment. That's redevelopment area 2.
no, I'm looking on page 7, and unless I'm reading this incorrectly, but particularly number 8, the reuse of vacant retail buildings, and it mentions the Kmart building on the northern part of the street. And so unless I'm reading this incorrectly, I mean, it says specific
No, you're not
redevelopment
reading
activities.
it, you're right, you're not reading it incorrectly. It's that they put that in the redevelopment zone. So, but not between, what is it, William Street and up to the former Kmart building is not redevelopment.
And I can see that the title of that, the header says South Carson, North Carson Street redevelopment plan. When the plan was originally called the South Carson Street redevelopment plan, because it's all of South Carson Street, it's the only property on North Carson Street is the Kmart property that's within that redevelopment area to which those policies apply.
Mike, it's called gerrymandering if you're running for Congress.
And I didn't bring it up at the beginning of the discussion. I should have. I mean, you're right. In the past, we've talked about possibly amending the plans, the policies, and what policies need to be amended within those plans. The Area 1 plan is from 1986. Obviously, we could update some of those policies, but I think the first part is to establish the priorities. I don't think we jump in and start saying specific things that we want to do until we have the discussion and establish the priorities, which is part of what I intended to do with some of the discussion tonight. But I think we got a ways to go to get through that discussion and get to our new elected officials at the beginning of next year to strategize for what the priorities are going to be.
Mike, it's a good question, and it's always very confusing because North Carson is like the stepchild of the city, and it could use a lot of redevelopment, but there's not in the redevelopment district, unfortunately. And I agree with you.
Correct me if I'm wrong, you have brought up the idea of a new redevelopment area up north. Are you gonna?
Yes, and I understand it's not easy to do.
Right.
Okay, any further comments, Mike?
I'm good, thank you.
That's it? Okay. So are there any RAC member reports or comments from any of you? No? All right, and welcome again, Gina. There's a lot that can be done here. So I'd like to turn it over back to the public for any public comments before Closing, the public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Redevelopment Citizen Committee, including any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda as an action item. So is there any public comment at all?
I see no public comment, Madam Chair.
Pardon me?
There is no public comment.
There is no public comment and no telephone either, right? I should have asked that earlier. Okay, thank you all so much for being here. Without further ado, we are now adjourned. Thank you.